And we're going to start with these basic definitions. So as a noun, it means practical contact with and or observation of facts, people, or events. The example is the team learned a great deal from their experience of losing the game. So that was an event that was an experience, and people learned from that. There are a lot of things that experiences do for us. We can learn from them, we can be hurt by them, we can find joy in them. There's just a lot of things that experiences can do for us, and those are all part and parcel of what we can design for virtual experiences as well. As a verb, it to experience means to actually encounter or undergo this kind of event or occurrence. So, everything we do is an experience. There is a lot of talk about VR as a storytelling mechanism. And while that's very true, at its more basic level, it's an experiential medium. So not everything that's done in VR has to be a fully authored story. It can be like playing the basketball game. It can be like playing super hot. It can be um, uh, relaxing with Trip. So there aren't stories in some of those. Those are experiences that we have at a more fundamental level than a story. Many experiences can give us the raw material to tell our own story. And many of you shared your stories about being with some of these experiences earlier in the class. So think of an experience as something that can generate a story, but doesn't have to start as a story. So, for today's talk, we're going to talk about a spectrum of experiences, the number of different ways that you could make an experience in some kind of immersive media. And we're going to look at a sorting chart that kind of takes things out into the different types of immersive media that we have around today. Then we're going to get into why are some experiences more memorable. And we saw some of that in Julia's article. They provoke bewilderment or awe or joy or give us a lot of agency. That's going to lead us to a little bit about what is memory. How does our brain process memory? What makes something memorable? This takes us next into the topic of perceptual ecology. This is an extremely exciting area of psychology that has pretty much underpinned all immersive media creation of experiences. And that is this concept of affordances, which is critical to perceptual ecology. So we're going to be going over that. We're also going to be looking at what do you start with to think about making an experience? And then the role of the participant. And Julia's article got into that a little bit too. We're going to finish the talk with some historical immersive experience examples. And I'd like to give you some of the history stuff. As we were talking about, much of this does not exist anymore. Much of the history of immersive experiences, the great things that have gone on, those shoulders that we can stand on, you can't do most of those anymore. But it doesn't hurt to look at the record, the recordings, the stuff that's been collected from when those experiences did exist. Now, before we actually start that, I want each of you to recall a memorable experience that you have had in your life, not necessarily in VR. Um, Take a couple minutes. We're going to take 1 minute. Just write it down, write a little note to yourself, and we'll come back to that later in class. So I'm going to give you 60 seconds of silence. Think of a memorable experience that you had. Okay. I think we could wrap up the writing. I'm not going to make you share all of those, so don't get too worried about that experience. Um, I want to look at this spectrum of experiences, and this is just food for thought. This is you'll find that this class is fairly agnostic about the type of experience you can design. These are all candidates for things that you can design, but I want you to know that those are all out there and that they exist. From static authored linear things. Now that's not an immersive experience. That would be like a book um, or a film. So there's a number of these, and I actually have a more filled out version of this, which I believe is there's a link to in your homework. So for immersive media, we kind of start with this 360. This is like having a sphere around you, or some other way that you are surrounded by the environment that has been created, and there's an authored story. So you can't really change it. You're sitting there, you can look around, but you can't really change that. So that's an authored story. And there are some examples here. Le Musque was a recent one that was done by a filmmaker, and you sat in this kind of chair, but you really just kind of had to watch this thing unfold. And every once in a while, Le Musque had a smell that came out, which was interesting. It wasn't great, but it was at least a try. There are also very early examples from directors like Chris Milk. He did a piece called Clouds Over Sidra, and it was Chris Milk who came up with this idea of VR as an empathy machine. So I have a couple of examples in each of these categories. You could just have the environment. Like if I wanted to take a trip to Greece, I might take a 360 camera and shoot a beautiful village in Greece, and then I would put that out as something that you could go and experience. Again, no story, no interaction, but there are things like the Blue Planets environments, a lot of travel stuff. Um, Full domes are like that. They are immersive, but let me see if I can find a quick full dome experience for you. Let's see.
Is it the thing in Vegas?
Well, that's the big mother of them all. Yeah. So there are hundreds of domes around the world. They've been out for years. They started as planetariums, but they can be used for all kinds of events or filmic kinds of productions. So this is one that used to be, well, actually, this one is played in cities all over the country. I think it's played in 90 cities at this point. This guy plays these drums, and all of this content is in a 180 dome around you, and you're either sitting in a beanbag chair or a couch watching this stuff in all of your peripheral vision. So they tend to be a little abstract, but they can be a little more objective if you're looking at maybe flying through a sunset or something like that. Full domes are interesting because they are getting more and more popular. There are actually some schools that are starting to teach full dome production, and it's got some technical challenges to it, but it's very cool. And these events like Mesmerica or Beautifica, there's a number of them that can be shown at, say, a science center or a planetarium, or you can get a pop-up dome and people can go in and sit there. We had a place in Los Angeles called the Wisdome, which had a number of domes where you could go and have experiences. And unfortunately, it has just shut down. So these are your kind of spherical authored stories or no stories, just environments, but they are immersive in the sense that they surround you. They take up all of your visual bandwidth. You can also have 3D environments with an authored story. So this could be a book or something that comes to life. There's some examples that you can get on the Oculus Store. Crow, which is one of Within's offerings. Within was a company that was created by Chris Milk that was then bought by, did Facebook buy them? I can't remember who bought them, but somebody bought them for a lot of money. Dear Angelica is another one. Henry, which is going to be one of your homework pieces, a Pixar-like movie done by Pixar veterans. Very interesting. So that's a 3D environment with an authored story. May or may not have a lot of things you can do besides looking around, but at least it is 3D, it's immersive. You can look anywhere in some of these viewable 3D environments. So say that one doesn't have a story, it's just a 3D environment, and you can look anywhere you want, but you may not be able to move in it. You just are able to look, turn your head from side to side and actually all the way to the back if you want. The New York Times had a piece called 52 Places to Go, where they just went and took a camera and got stereo images of places, and you could just look at it and look around. Then there are 3D environments that you can walk through. So you can, teleport or walk through, or have some kind of motion, some kind of navigation through the space. I put an example there of one of my pieces, which I can't find anymore, so I'm still trying to locate that. But there are a lot of these out there. Then we come up to more agency than just navigation. So this is when you can pick up the basketball. This is when you can, pick up a gun and shoot somebody, or pick a flower. So there are a number of ways that you can use that kind of agency that's more than just getting around the space, but actually interacting with objects within the space. Then even more agency. Maybe there's a character in there that you can talk to. Maybe the immerse language thing, where you can, I can see where we're going to have lots of these where there are AI characters that can speak the language really well. And you'll be able to interact with them in many different ways. Have a cup of coffee at the cafe, or play a game of chess, whatever that might be. You can have games with agency. The games we expect agency in. They may have many levels or chapters. One of the most beautiful ones is Moss. It's a beautiful little game, but about a mouse called, I forgot the mouse's name. Yeah, I forgot his name. Um, anyway, beautiful one. But there are a lot of those out there. That tends to be many of the examples that you can buy from the Oculus Store. Serialized narrative that might be immersive, an immersive story with some agency, but it's serialized. So you go to one section, just like these streaming shows that have episodes and a season. Business was one. Business was an immersive comedy, and it came out every few weeks. They did another episode. It didn't have any agency, but it did kind of force you to look at different things and interact it visually with the characters within that. You can have things that have additional senses. So there could be scent, or there could be haptics. There could be other kinds of things that allow you to interact with the environment. You can even have brain control interfaces. You've probably all heard about Neuralink from Elon Musk, and he seems to think that we're all ready for that. But there are other ways to do that. There are headsets that you can put on that either read your EEG signals, or just read the muscle movements on your face. And those things can be brought in as inputs to give you a different kind of agency in these virtual worlds. Then there's the creative ones, and we were just talking about these a little bit. These are the ones where you create the experience from scratch inside the world. So this would be your tilt brush or your open brush. There's a number of them, like Gravity Sketch, and we can look at a few of those later in the class. There are also ones that are more generative or algorithmic, like Kevin Mack's work, where he's actually writing the code that makes those objects whirl and twist and change their textures in an animated way. So those are ones where the whole world isn't built right away, but it keeps making itself as you are in it. Um, Open-ended 3D environments. This is another one where the space is there and you give people a lot of options for agency. But every time you come in, it starts at the same exact point, right? So they're open-ended because there's no goal state. It's not a game you're playing. Trip might be kind of like this, except it does change a little bit if you've kind of gone through certain levels. That we don't have many of this next category, which are open-ended living environments. So these are ones where if you go in and you move something, the next person that comes in is going to see that object in that spot you moved it to. So anything that happens in the world is persistent. So the worlds are going to be different every time you come in to them. Multi-participants, this is another kind of experience. You could design something that's made for two or more people to be in together, whether they're building something together or they have to rely on each other to go through a goal of, say, a game or a scavenger hunt or something like that. But and you can do things like open brush with multiple players. And I think the one that somebody mentioned before, which was the music one, is another. Patch XR is another one where you can have multiple people in playing music together. So you can see there's a lot of these. You can have more person-to-person interaction in these multi-participants where you've got to cooperate to get something done, much like an escape room. And then, at the very end, we've got physical reality in life. So this is not an inclusive everything that you could possibly design, but this gives you some examples of what you could be thinking of. So probably too much food for thought, but at least that gives you the expanse, the spectrum of things that you could design for. Okay. Now we'll talk about what makes an experience memorable. So every experience starts with some kind of stimulus. Something happens and you have a reaction to that, and then you start to understand what's going on, those type of things. Now I want to go back to that experience you wrote down earlier. So if you think of that experience, maybe think about where it might fit in that spectrum chart. Was that most of those were probably real life experiences. So they're going to be way down towards the end where you were interacting with a person or, on a runaway bobsled or whatever that might be. How many of you did write down an interaction with another person, say a friend or a family member, as part of that? You don't have to share it. You just put your, let's see. Yep. Okay. So Rose, Sarah, raise your hand. Yeah. If you do the little hand icon, I can kind of see that. So not many of you, maybe four. How many about a beautiful location you visited? Yeah. A game you played? That great volleyball game on the beach that summer. um, so there's, that moment where everything seemed perfect. That might be your memorable experience, or some big event from life, like buying your first car, or, you know, stepping off your first Richie's plank. Anybody want to just mention theirs? You don't have to. So this is more for you to think about Why was that experience memorable? Was it a first? Was it a poignant moment? Was it full of emotion? There are so many reasons that an experience can be memorable. So, just keep that in your head, So here we are. You've got a stimulus that started that experience, and then you had a reaction to it, and then somewhere you had a cognitive understanding of it, and that allowed you to place that experience in the other things that make up the rest of your life. Now, we do so much of our life on autopilot. We don't think about these things. We don't really remember them. We just experience them. What did you eat for breakfast last Wednesday? Which shoe do you put on first all the time? You always put the same shoe on? Do we know? It's not like it's really critical to our survival, so we don't think about those things in terms of remembering them. So while those actions mean something in our lives, it's not necessarily significant or profound or something that is going to decide whether we survive or not. But if the experience does have some kind of an emotion attached to it, or it's really important to our survival, then we do process those kinds of experiences differently. So, go to if you've got an experience that is causing you to have some kind of an emotional reaction, your brain goes into a different kind of system. So your brain's amygdala, which is actually this pair of almond-shaped structures in the center of your brain, the amygdala gets involved. It is the emotional center of your brain. It not only helps you figure out what these emotions should be, it helps encode them into memories when it thinks, it's your brain. But the amygdala has a part in deciding what is emotionally strong enough to be considered as something you should remember. So the other part of your brain that helps you remember is the hippocampus. And this helps form episodic memories, which are memories of events that happen to us. And this, interestingly enough, is one of the parts of the brain that continues to produce new neurons throughout your life, even though it's more slowly later. But this thing is always creating new neurons. If a person loses their amygdala, if for some reason it's removed from their brain, they can't remember anything, and they don't have emotions. They're kind of really numb. They're not afraid of anything. So it's an interesting part of our brain that's really important to survival. Why do we even have these memories? Well, because some of them are going to make the difference between whether we live or die. Those neural connections that happen when these emotional things hit us and we encode them into memories, these are new neural connections, that the hippocampus can help us form. And they also tell us how to react. The way that memories are created and recalled, we don't really know. It's one of the mysteries of the mind that neuroscientists are working on and trying to tease out what's going on there. Some of your memories could be decades old. If your mom's apple pie, smelled great coming out of the oven, or every time you went to the beach in the summer, you remember what that sitting in the sun felt like. Or, the one that everybody talks about is your first kiss. All those things that are really meaningful to us are things that get encoded into memories. Why do we even care, though? The idea of creating virtual reality experiences is to give somebody something that gives them something they want to remember. Um, it could be scary, or it could be just fun. But if you're giving people VR experiences and they really don't fulfill any of those purposes, and it's like, so what? I don't remember that. I didn't care about that experience. Some of the ones you did, you may not remember. Um, but the things like Richie's plank and trip are probably ones that you'll remember. You know, they probably are encoded in a part of your brain that is longer lasting memories. I would bet in 10 years, some of you will remember what it was like to be on Richie's plank. Not every experience is going to be that long lived, but it's a goal. It's a goal to give people emotions and things that make us human in these immersive experiences. And there are lots of ways to do it. And most of these ideas that you're going to be hearing about during this class come from other disciplines. So we look at psychology a lot. We look at cinema. I mean, we've learned a lot about making emotionally charged films over the last 100 and so years. Music does this to us. Why does music do that to us? Can we bank on that power of music to make our experiences more emotionally salient? What does theater give us? You know, what do theme parks give us? So these are all disciplines where they're creating experiences for people. And many of those techniques can be brought to bear on creating a virtual reality experience. Whoops, wrong way. This is a picture I just love to show. It's an image of the brain lighting up when a mother kisses her 2-month-old son. So she kisses his head, and all this reaction happens in his brain, and we can tell what parts of the brain are lighting up. Dopamine gets released. That gives a feeling of well-being. Oxytocin gets released. Oxytocin is the trust hormone. It's the one that provides attachment. And that also can reduce fear. It can give you more confidence. This is in the way these brains have lit up. It's a sign that this baby understands some of that he's protected. Now, it's not just the physical thing of kissing the baby. It is very much hormonal, but we can create experiences that also help release these hormones. These hormones regulate mood, they regulate emotions. And by being very, very creative and clever with how we're making these experiences and putting in those moments of awe and bewilderment and joy, we can have the kind of experience that people will remember for quite a long time. Are there any questions so far? Remember, when I've got this on, I can't really see you. So when I